What's up, guys? It's Randa. So, if you are of a similar age to me, there's a very good chance that you grew up with R.L. Stine being part of your childhood in some capacity. Or if you weren't actively engaging with it, you were at least aware of it. You had the Goosebumps book series, you had the Goosebumps television show, video games, toys, you name it, it was probably out there at some point at the height of its popularity. And right along with the cultural inundation of the Steinoverse, you also had the Fear Street books. Now, the mystique and the allure of the Fear Street books were that they were for older kids and teenagers. They were scarier, creepier, gorier, more mature. And so, naturally, since I was a scaredy cat little kid, I was not old enough and was not allowed to read them. But now, thanks to Netflix, we now have a new take on the Fear Street books to enjoy. Netflix is currently releasing a 3-part movie series based on the Fear Street books, and each movie is set in a different time period, with part 1 being 1994, part 2 being 1978, and part 3 being set all the way back in 1666. And Netflix is releasing these movies on a weekly basis, so as I'm filming this right now, part 1 and part 2 are already out. I believe R.L. Stine himself said that these movies are rated R, and if you ask me, that's an incredibly smart move on Netflix's part. All of the kids who grew up with Goosebumps and Fear Street at the height of their popularity are adults now, and if they're like me, their horror tastes have grown up right alongside them. And, plus it's going to appeal to the nostalgia aspect, where all of us want to see how R.L. Stine's works have now been interpreted as grittier, more mature R-rated movies. The movies, just like the books, take place in a town called Shadyside. Now, beyond that, I have purposely tried to avoid reading anything or watching anything about them beyond like some of the trailers they've released, purposely so I could go in fresh. All of that being said, there are going to be spoilers for part 1 all throughout this, so if you have not watched it yet and you don't want to be spoiled, go watch that and then come back and watch this later. But without further ado, we're just going to jump right into part 1. In part 1, we open in 1994 in the Shadyside Mall in a bookstore called B. Dalton's, and we already have a wonderfully classic horror setup with a single young woman closing at the end of the day, and she gets a phone call from a guy named Ryan, and the line very quickly goes dead. So this leans in from the very start into the trope of misdirection, because as she goes walking through the mall to find Ryan, who also works in the mall, we get several classic fake-out startles, first with the janitor, and then with Ryan himself sneaking up to startle her. When she returns to the store to close up and wait for Ryan, first the metal roll-down gate at the front of the store won't fully close, and then she starts hearing noises further in the shop. And although she goes to investigate and at first thinks that a book has just fallen off of the bookshelf of its own accord, we very quickly see a figure, run through the bookshelves behind her, and because white people in horror movies, she goes further into the store to investigate because she thinks it's just Ryan playing a prank on her. And I think they did a good job with playing with, the different cuts and angles during this scene. I thought they utilized the layout of the bookstore really well, particularly when she comes around a corner through some aisles and we actually see a masked and robed figure sneak up behind her with a knife in hand. So, in true horror fashion, when she turns around, the attacker stabs her book. That's some convenient placement right there. But anyway, so as she runs away, the stuck metal grate at the front of the store actually turns out to be a godsend because she's able to slip out from underneath it and run away. And when she hides in another store and dials 911, instead of, hiding and remaining hidden and talking to the dispatcher, she peeks her head up over the counter and then scurries away when the attacker runs into the store. And because a horror movie in the 90s wouldn't be complete without it, we of course get a tense moment of her sneaking through the store that's filled with black lights and novelties and horror masks, which of course the attacker is hiding amongst. And he then attacks her and manages to slash her across the stomach. And even though she pushes him away, I'm not really sure why he doesn't just follow her and finish her off. Even though he stumbles, it's pretty obvious which way she ran. The store isn't that big, but I guess we just needed more of a tense stalking scene. Gotta drag that shit out. She manages to get away from him and she's running through the food court and she actually sees bodies strewn throughout the food court, so we actually already see that this is a more large-scale massacre than just a guy stalking one girl. And he catches up with her and stabs her in the back, and I've gotta say, the girl is actually putting up a pretty good fight when a stab like that probably would have punctured a lung or at least something else vital. So when he rolls her over and stabs her in the chest, she manages to pull the mask off, and it's Ryan, who could have seen it coming? Everyone. We all saw it coming. All of us. The police then show up right in time to shoot Ryan in the head, so I guess we're never going to get any answers for that. We then cut to the opening credits where we learn through a voiceover news report that 8 people were killed in the mall massacre, and that unfortunately this kind of violent crime is all too common in Shadyside, which has earned itself the nickname Killer Capital USA. Moral of the story, maybe don't name your town Shadyside. That would be like naming it Sketchville or Murderopolis and then being like, why do bad things keep happening here? But yeah, so the news reports and headlines go all the way back through the history of the town, really highlighting the history of violent crime and strange happenings in Shadyside, as well as juxtaposing Shadyside with the much more picturesque Sunnyvale. We cut back into the action to find our teen protagonist Dina writing out several variations of an angsty note to someone named Sam. Note to self, I'm sure that gender-ambiguous name isn't deliberate at all. And as Dina moves through the house cleaning up, we realize that it is the morning after the mall attack. I am then hit with the most violently brutal uppercut of nostalgia when we hear the internet dial-up tone and we see her brother, Joshua, in an AOL chat room. God, all you sweet, innocent babies for whom those words mean nothing. Stay pure. We see that it's a group chat called the Shadyside Killers, in which they are chatting about the previous night's events and its similarities to crimes of the past. They're certainly not establishing a pattern here or anything like that. So their prevailing theory is that it is a woman named Sarah Fear, don't worry, Fear spelled F-I-E-R, who they believe to be a witch, came back and possessed Ryan to commit the murders in order to take out her revenge on Shadyside. Dina, clearly unfamiliar with how popular the true crime genre will become in a few decades, tells Josh to stop being so wrapped up in all of his dark, weird theories about what's going on in Shadyside. Dina, the vast majority of podcasts would like to have a word with you. Dina and Josh get to school and we are treated to some wonderfully teenage scenes with Josh staring at the object of his affection, Kate, and Dina unable to stop noticing all of the boys and girls who are coupled off in the hallways. Again, I'm sure there's nothing deliberate about these very heteronormative displays of affection. When Dina gets to her locker, we see that Heather, the girl who was killed the night before, her locker is only a few down from Dina's, and students have already created a makeshift memorial out of it with notes and pictures and all that on it. Dina's friends, Kate and Simon, make jokes about the wish, and when Dina pushes back on it, they insist that they don't believe in it and it's just a fun thing to make jokes about. And when Dina tries to talk Kate into giving Sam something from her at the football game that night, Kate tells her she is not getting involved in her ex drama. Even though she quit band, Dina dons the uniform one more time so she can get on the school bus and go to the candlelight vigil in Sunnyvale before the football game and face Sam. And as the school bus travels from Shadyside to Sunnyvale, we once again see the stark difference between the two, with Sunnyvale having, sprawling fancy houses and establishments throughout it. Well, this is really the horror version of Pawnee and Eagleton, huh? While the Sunnyvale mayor gives a speech at the vigil, Dina spots a cheerleader who we assume to be Sam, who has a football player's arm very conspicuously around her shoulders as they cozy up to each other and get a little handsy. Come on, guys, it's a candlelight vigil. Really? Sam finds Dina where she slipped away to mope, and Dina returns the box of Sam's stuff to great dramatic effect. God, it's such angsty and quintessentially teenage drama, and I'm living for it. But wait, Dina broke up with Sam? Dina insists it's because Sam chose to move to Sunnydale, and Sam points out that it's because her parents got divorced and she didn't have a choice but to move with her mom. And I've got to say, you don't have too much of a leg to stand on here, Dina. While Dina and Sam are arguing, the real charmer who was groping Sam, Peter, starts a fight at the vigil by remarking that what happened was a joke, not a tragedy. Mr. Sensitivity, folks. He will do great things. The Shadyside group takes this with the normal level-headedness and rationale that you can expect from teenagers, which is to say that they get riled up on the bus drive home and decide they're going to kill those preppy assholes from Sunnyvale. Just then a car catches up to the bus with 2 of the passengers wearing skull masks like the killer from the night before, honking and throwing bottles at the bus. Of course, we learn that the guy driving is Peter, and then Sam is in the passenger seat trying to talk him down. Dina grabs the big sports cooler and tells Kate to open the emergency exit at the back of the bus so they can retaliate. And let me tell you, school bus drivers do not get paid enough to deal with this shit. Just then, Dina gets a really dramatic nosebleed, and when this startles Dina and Kate, it causes her to drop the cooler, which falls out of the back of the bus and hits the car, causing it to accidentally swerve off into the ditch in the woods. We cut to the car where it's crashed further in the forest, with Sam stumbling out of the car. She gets a really sudden nosebleed, just like the one Dina had, and suddenly she gets a vision with a bunch of old images, including some that are seemingly about Sarah Fear the Witch, until Dina grabs her arm and snaps her out of it. Weirdly enough, Dina seems to be the only one who is down here checking on them before Simon and Kate catch up to her. Let me tell you, this school bus driver might have stopped the bus, but he is not getting involved in this shit. When the sheriff, Nick Good, arrives, all of the teenagers insist that the crash was just an accident, but after he leaves, Peter then threatens Dina afterward. We cut back to the forest just near the car accident, and we hear these low, menacing, indistinct voices and see a sudden flash of a woman screaming. The next day, after seeing a news report that identified Ryan Torres as the mall killer, Dina tries to call Sam's room at the hospital, and Sam's mom picks up, and it goes not well. So after that, she goes to check on some really insistent ringing of her doorbell, only to find that no one is there when she answers the door. But wait, there is a very welcoming figure standing across the street in a skull mask, similar to the one from last night, and a full skeleton costume. So in true horror movie fashion, Dina, assuming it's just Peter, yells at the figure and goes back inside. Nothing will go wrong here. But when she goes back inside to the kitchen with Josh, the figure is now standing in their backyard and brandishing a knife. So Dina just grabs a knife of her own and storms outside because, a knife duel to the death is the only way to handle teen drama. But by the time she gets there, the figure is gone, or so she thinks, because of course it runs across the frame once she has gone back inside. Kate and Simon are babysitting just a few houses over, and when Dina calls to complain about Peter, they hear a crash and find the door of the house they're in broken open. They then see the masked figure inside the house throwing things around and rummaging through their stuff, and since everyone has assumed it's just Peter, Kate uses her whole entire common sense and yells at him, and then he disappears during a moment of distraction. After dropping the kids off with another neighbor, Kate and Simon go over to see Dina and Josh and plan what they're going to do about Peter because, calling the cops after someone breaks into a home with a knife is just way too boring and obvious a plan. At the hospital, Kate uses her connections with the delightfully creepy Nurse Betty to get Dina back to see Sam even though hospital visiting hours are over. But wait! Peter has been with Sam all evening, and since Dina thinks that Sam is just covering for him, it evolves into a big argument. But you know what'll put a stop to a fight real quick? Oh, I don't know, how about a Sunnyvale jock getting skewered through the stomach with a knife? With Peter down for the count, permanently, Dina and Sam run away from the attacker, and when they pass the others don't follow quickly enough, so they all end up separated again. Kate, Simon, and Josh decide to just go straight up Jack an ambulance, and Dina and Sam hide near the exit because they see the masked attacker near the door. When they hide at the front desk, they find the admittance nurse already dead, so this guy's clearly been busy since he's been at this hospital. After Nurse Betty shows up and he turns his head into a brain corn dog on a knife stick, he chases Dina and Sam, grabbing Sam so that Dina jumps on his back to save her, proving that there really is nothing stronger than a surly teenage lesbian. The others pull up in the ambulance to rescue them, and while Sam makes a run for it, Dina sees that the attacker's mask has come off and it's actually Ryan underneath the mask. Very dead Ryan with a very real hole in his head. The kids escape in the ambulance and head to the police station, but the deputy who's talking to them doesn't take them seriously since Sheriff Good shot Ryan himself. Sheriff Good shows up and seems to be taking them more seriously until he starts cracking jokes himself, telling them that they've had prank calls and copycats all weekend. He only starts to get worried once he gets a frantic phone call from the hospital and leaves to go check it out. On their way out, Dina stages a distraction to steal the deputy's gun, and then they hurry out of there. Meanwhile, Simon is approaching a girl who's sitting on the sidewalk outside and singing to herself. But when he gets close, she looks up and he notices that her face is noticeably scarred right before she pulls out a razor and slashes his ankle. Simon fights with her in the street, but before she can kill him, Dina shows up and shoots him with this very conveniently recently acquired gun. And although the kids escape, this girl must be on the same protein powder regimen that Ryan is because she's already getting up and shaking off multiple bullet wounds to the chest and head as the kids get away. In fact, as she sits up and starts singing to herself again, we see her wounds heal and her eye regenerate. Back at Dina and Josh's house, the kids piece together enough information for Josh to figure out that the girl who attacked Simon is Ruby Lane, a girl who killed several people and then herself back in 1965. And I gotta say, girl's looking pretty good to have been dead for 30 years. Now, because of Josh's interest in the dark history of Shadyside, he's able to pull a bunch of old news articles and stuff to show them that this cycle always seems to repeat in Shadyside, with seemingly normal people snapping and going on these killing sprees, all the way back to 1666, with the first reported incident being a pastor named Cyrus Miller. Josh's prevailing theory is this all goes back to the witch Sarah Fear, and that she's turning the residents of the town into killers to enact her own revenge, because in 1666 that was also the year that Sarah herself was hanged for witchcraft, and ever since then these killing sprees have been happening in Shadyside. None of that explains why two of Sarah's undead killers have become fixated on them now, though, until Sam admits that she saw the witch the previous night after the car crash. So, naturally, traipsing into the woods in the dead of night to investigate the car crash seems like the most logical plan. They reenact the scene from the night before, and underneath the moss and the undergrowth they find old chains that are connected to the skeletal remains of, you guessed it, Sarah Fear. Congratulations, kids, you stumbled on a witch's grave. The prize is nothing. Unfortunately, that means there might be a lot more undead killers coming after them if Sarah is pissed off at them. They try to rebury her bones and lay her to rest, but when Sam gets another nosebleed and accidentally touches the bones with her bloody hand, she sees another, more prolonged vision of the past. Bad news, though, their plan didn't work because the Camp Nightwing killer comes running out of the woods at them and starts swinging an axe like an all-star slugger. When they make it back to the ambulance and escape, they manage to piece together that the killers aren't after all of them. They're only after Sam. Since she disturbed the witch's grave and got blood on her bones, Sarah Fear wants more of her blood. Meanwhile, after visiting the hospital, Sheriff Good starts to piece things together for himself after he finds Ruby Lane's black blood and her necklace in the street outside of the police department. The kids sneak into the school to get clothes from the lost and found and to decontaminate from having Sam's blood on them so the killers won't be targeting them. While they're there, Dina and Sam have a moment, Josh and Kate have a moment, and Simon's just doing his own Simon thing. The kids set up a trap to lure the killers in with Sam's blood, where they then plan to trap them and then blow them up. Skullmask, Ruby Lane, and the Camp Nightwing killer all converge on the school, and sure enough, they follow the blood trails and go right past the kids without even seeming to notice them. The kids lock them in the bathroom, Sam escapes through an air duct, and then they dump more accelerant in the bathroom before lighting it and running away before it can blow up. Once the fire dies down, their plan does seem to have worked. Right up until the charred remains of the killers begin reforming and regenerating right in front of their eyes. After the kids run and barricade themselves in another room, Kate has reached her breaking point, and she says that the only viable plan is to give Sam to the killers so that it can be over and the rest of them can be safe. Dina, naturally, has a problem with this, even though Sam herself says that it's the only way and she doesn't want them to die for her. Although Sam walks out into the hallway to sacrifice herself, they pull her back in and rescue her from the Camp Nightwing killer at the last second because Josh was able to figure something out from an old news article. It turns out that there was actually a survivor from the Camp Nightwing killings named C. Berman, who Josh says is the key to everything. While the others are trying to hold off the killer by barring the door, Dina and Sam work on trying to contact C. Berman, and Sam figures out the loophole. Although C. Berman survived the attack, her heart stopped and she was saved by somebody performing CPR. So technically, as Sam puts it, she survived by dying, which they piece together and equate to the rhyme about the witch's curse, which says she'll follow you until you're dead. So they figure their only real hope is to kill Sam and then resuscitate her, so they escape the school to enact their plan. Meanwhile, the sheriff arrives at someone's house, and when he goes to knock on the door, he hesitates before instead slipping a note through the mail slot that just says, "It's happening again." So, to absolutely no one's surprise, the sheriff seems to know more than he's letting on. The kids break into the pharmacy at the grocery store where Simon works because between Kate's dealing knowledge and Simon's brother having accidentally OD'd before being resuscitated before, they portion out pills that will effectively kill Sam and then they'll be able to revive her with an EpiPen. The kids once again set a trap, this time putting Sam's blood on them in order to lure the killers, which will give Sam time to take all of the pills and have them take effect. While the others go to patrol the exits, Sam and Dina prepare to start giving Sam all of the pills. Sam, meanwhile, is having some trepidation, which is understandable since they're a bunch of teenagers playing murder pharmacist. But Dina reassures her that she will bring her back, and they set the plan into motion. Sam is obviously starting to become really incapacitated by the medication, and when Skullmask shows up to attack them, Kate sets him on fire with an improvised flamethrower, and Dina helps Sam run away, but they scatter the remaining pills in the process. But that's okay, because Dina has a plan. At the back of the grocery store, we spot a lobster tank. So while they listen to Kate trying to fend off Skullmask, Dina drowns Sam in the lobster tank. And I'm not gonna lie to you, for a split second when they first showed us the tank, I thought it was gonna be revealed that Sam had a really severe shellfish allergy, and Dina was gonna force her to eat raw lobster and then revive her with an EpiPen. Simon is dealing with Ruby Lane, Josh is dealing with the Camp Nightwing killer, and meanwhile, Skullmask kind of gets an upper hand on Kate, and first turns her abdomen into Swiss cheese with his knife before he kills her by feeding her head into some kind of meat slicer. It's fairly gruesome and a real bummer because I really enjoyed Kate and I was really pulling for her to make it through. In their fleeing from their own respective killers, Simon and Josh spot Kate's body and, boy, they're really gonna wish they hadn't got distracted because in that momentary pause, the Camp Nightwing killer kills Simon with an axe to the head. Boy, the kids are really dropping like flies at this point. Things are really looking bleak, but right as the killers have the remaining teens cornered, Sam drowns, and just like that, the killers are just gone. They start using EpiPens to try and revive Sam, and seriously, they stab this girl with like 7 different injections, and I'm no medical professional, but that seems like a hell of a lot of adrenaline, and meanwhile they don't do any CPR on her, like, I don't know. Whatever, I was dumb as hell when I was a teenager too. Just when all seems lost, Dina finally thinks to do CPR, and after a few tense moments, Sam revives, and it's looking like maybe this whole nightmare is over, but hey, there's 18 minutes left in this movie, so don't get too comfortable. We next see the kids being interviewed separately by the sheriff, and it's clear that they've rehearsed a story about what happened in the grocery store because obviously they fully believe that no one is going to believe them about a witch's curse and undead killers. Unfortunately, in a small town with a large underprivileged population, people will be all too quick to believe a story about 2 kids who got wrapped up in drug dealing and met a tragic end. The sheriff tries to appeal to Dina, knowing that he doesn't have the full story, but she insists that their friends are dead and nothing can change that now. As they leave the police station, Sam's angry mom is waiting for them, but apparently all of this trauma and this nightmarish hell scenario have made the littlest lesbian brave, because she tells Dina she'll see her later that night and kisses Dina in front of her mom before leaving. That night, Dina and Sam are enjoying the true gay pastime of listening to a mixtape when we get another fake out with the doorbell ringing. But don't worry, it's just the pizza Josh ordered. But then, the phone rings, and guess what, folks? C. Berman is back in the picture. She tells them that they might have stopped the killers, but they didn't stop the witch. She makes the rules, and she'll never give up. We then see the witch performing some kind of ritual, and then we see the names of past killers etched into stone, and then right below the name Ryan Torres, the name Samantha Fraser appears. When Dina turns to find Sam behind her, we learn that the witch's true curse is the bury your gays trope because Sam stabs Dina right in the stomach. Downstairs, Josh is once again in his AOL chat room and he's defending Kate and Simon against the rumors that have already begun to spread about them. And with his loud music, he can't hear the fight that's going on upstairs. Damn you youths and your rock and roll. Suddenly, a hand appears on Josh's shoulder in the reflection of the computer screen. But don't worry, it's just Dina looking honestly pretty good for somebody who's walking around with a stomach wound. She takes Josh upstairs where she's tied Sam up with the phone cord, and honestly, this must be some like industrial strength phone cord. I also love this very 90s approach to subduing somebody. If this happened today, we'd just all be screwed. Dina kneels down and promises Sam that she's going to get her back. We get one last murderous growl from Sam, and then we cut to a to be continued. We do get a preview for part 2, but we're not going to get into that in this video because I am going to do a separate breakdown of that one. Honestly, I really enjoyed this. It really gave me the same kind of aura of those old R.L. Stine books, while still being obviously more mature and more gruesome with the violence and things like that. And I really enjoy the lore that they're building for Shadyside, as well as the narrative device they're going to be using of working backwards in time with the trilogy. I thought 1994 was a very cool time period for this. I was really young in the early 90s, so I didn't have like the teen experience with it, but a lot of the stuff they included still gave me a lot of nostalgia with it. And honestly, I think there's a reason that a lot of horror seems to work best when it's set in the past, even if it's the pretty recent past. I really enjoyed the cast. All of the kids were pretty familiar archetypes while still giving them the room and nuance to grow into their own thing. And I can honestly say I really liked the whole core cast of kids. I also thought the inclusion of Dina and Sam's storyline was a nice touch, both in the sincerity of being a teenager and the feelings that come with discovering those things about yourself, while also touching upon the more unfortunate drawbacks of being an LGBTQ individual in a small town in the 90s. Oh, also, before I forget, very cool. If you are in Melrose, in Hollywood, or in the surrounding area, they are actually doing a Fear Street tie-in where they are having a like haunted attraction pop-up that you can go to in person. So if you are in that area, you can actually go, and the setup I think is like a video rental store. You go through and then go through the haunted attraction. It seems super cool. It is running through, I believe, July 18th. So that will be 2 days after part 3 releases. You'll have time to get to it until then. But yeah, it sounds amazing. I obviously won't get to go. I'm just too far away. But if you go, if you're interested, you should go. And if you do go, please drop a comment below and tell me about it. I would love to hear about it. It sounds so cool. I'm very envious of the people who are getting a chance to go. But other than that, I think that's going to do it for us today. I will hopefully have a chance to get the part 2 breakdown out pretty soon. We'll see how busy this week shapes up to be. Other than that, give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Share any of your thoughts down below. I would love to hear them. And if you enjoy my content, why not subscribe? And if you do, be sure to hit that bell icon so you are notified anytime I upload something. But other than that, I have been Randa. This has been the Southern Fried Nerd, and I hope you have a great day. See ya.